I'm Maria, and this is the Agile State of Mind. Welcome! Today we're going to talk about refining the refinement. In Scrum, we run one sprint after another. One sprint ends and the next one starts immediately. How do we make that happen? How do we make sure that the team has enough information about a new functionality to be able to start working on it in the next sprint? The magic is called Backlog Refinement. Today, we're going to talk about some useful practices to refine the work for the next sprint. I will also explain what's Product Backlog and what's the definition of ready. Let's start! Refining the backlog is preparing the items so they are ready to be selected in the next sprint planning and become sprint backlog. What's the objective of the backlog refinement? The goal is to achieve a shared understanding among the team about the work to be done, and that each team member is aware of the scope and nature of every task to be done in the next sprint. Backlog refinement is an act of adding details, estimates, and order to the product backlog items. Usually that means meeting with the team and discussing the details, but it can also be done asynchronously. Note that Scrum doesn't add refinements to the list of the Scrum events, which means the form the refinement will take is free and up to the Scrum team. Now I will briefly explain what product backlog is, because it's a prerequisite to do the refinement. You can't do a refinement if there's nothing to refine. What is a product backlog? Well, if you have a product, you have a backlog. It's a wish list of everything you would like to do with your product. It's a living artifact. It never stops changing because the product requirements, the market needs, and even the technology keeps on changing constantly. The product owner is responsible for the product backlog, including its content, its availability, so everyone knows where to find it, and its ordering. It means they are responsible for maintaining the product backlog organized and accessible for everyone. But still, everyone in the team can add new requirements and definition to the product backlog items. It's interesting to see user stories written by every member of the Scrum team, because a great user story is not one that has been perfectly written by one person, but one that has been discussed in a team. And now we have two new definitions: user stories and product backlog items. I use both of them interchangeably. User stories come from extreme programming and are not required by Scrum, where they are called product backlog items. User stories help us describe technical functionalities in a human, natural language, and they help bring the team focus to the user. How to write user stories is a great material for whole another video. Once I make it, I will add it in the description below. Let's move on with the refinement. So the goal of refinement is to make the user stories ready for the sprint. What does it mean to be ready? Here's where the definition of ready comes in handy. It's like a checklist of everything that needs to be defined in a user story or product backlog item so it can be selected for the sprint. Ready stories should be clear, concise, and actionable. How do we do a refinement? I will give you two examples of what the Scrum teams I worked with did. One, regular meeting of the Scrum team, and the product owner brings the user stories and explains the business context. A variation would be that the product owner brings epics, one level higher than the user stories, which describe the business context, and then the whole team creates their user stories. For that, a useful practice would be user story mapping, which helps identifying everything that's needed for the functionality. 2. A refinement can also be a collaborative document. The product owner prepares a document with the stories they want to define, and the whole Scrum team can add the definition and comments to any of them in an asynchronous way. So they do it whenever it fits them best. This preferably could be done after a very good kickoff meeting about the initiative, so the whole team knows what needs to be done, and can be followed by a short meeting to clarify any doubts and arrive at conclusions. And now, what does a refinement meeting usually look like? 1. The product owner or any stakeholders explain the business context and why the team should work on this next. Imagine there is a new legislation and you need to ask the users for the permission to use the camera. You don't just go to the team and say, ask for permission. You try to explain the context, because knowing the problem, the team can be able to provide an optimal solution. This is preferably done with the stakeholders. So in case you have a new legislation, it's nice to invite some legal advisor. I really like this concept of bringing closer the team and the stakeholders. This way we avoid having a bottleneck in the product owner and him as a gatekeeper for the team. It's nice that the team and the stakeholders can freely talk about how to find the best solution for their problem. 2. Define the feasibility. Is this technically possible? Does it make sense? The product owner brings the what to the team, a problem to be solved, and the team decides on the how, which means how to best solve this problem. You can derive spikes that are some research stories to gather more information and insights about what needs to be done. 3. Slicing user stories. During the refinement, we want to make sure that the user stories are as small as possible. The smaller the user story is, the easier to understand what it should be doing. Check if the user stories fit into one sprint. 4. Add acceptance criteria. This goes into the writing user story subject, but it's also about being test-driven and having the stories testable. Mike Cohn calls them the conditions of satisfaction, and it is simply a high-level acceptance test that will be true after the user story is complete. It helps the development team understand the desired outcome of the new functionality and serves as a base for the test scenarios for it. 5. The definition of ready. It serves the development team as a final check, because it's a checklist, to see if everything that you needed to be defined is defined and the user story is ready. 6. Estimations. Once everything from the previous points is done, the team can start estimating. It is also a practice that is not required by Scrum, but the teams can estimate in relative measures for many different reasons. Firstly, to check if the team arrived at the shared understanding of the item, and as a result, the estimates are very similar. If not, it's a sign that more discussion is needed. Estimations help define the team's velocity per sprint, which means the number of story points you are able to complete every sprint. Thanks to it, it's easier to predict how much work can be done in every sprint and spot any issues derived from the fact that the velocity of the team changes considerably from one sprint to another. 7. Tools and techniques. There are different techniques that can help the team write and define the user stories. User story mapping, I.N.V.E.S.T, S.M.A.R.T. I'll talk about all of them in a video dedicated to writing user stories. To summarize, Backlog Refinement is an ongoing activity of the Scrum team to make sure that the work, that is, their product backlog items or user stories, are ready to be pulled into the next sprint. It's not just another Scrum event, because it can take different forms. From my experience though, having a regular session with the Scrum team to refine helps creating a habit and also builds the team, owing to the fact that it serves as a perfect opportunity for the team to share knowledge, both about the product and about the technology you use. And that's all for today. Hope you got some inspiration about how to do your refinements. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye!